One baru.
Tadi Sharon stop sharing or stop. Sharon, can I start now? Okay. Assalamualaikum. And very good morning and salam Jumat to everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us today, finding time joining us today in CUIC virtually connected series. My name is Rusayani Ismail, Dean of the School of Economics, Finance and Banking. Um, and I will be the moderator for our session today of Up Close and Personal with Mr. Naguib, COVID-19, how unprepared were we from business unusual to the new equilibrium. As you all know, we have around 4,000 students inside our campus right now. I hope they stay safe, be patient, and just to inform that by 27th of April, we're going to have our classes back online. So our dear student, please stay safe and be patient, and hope that by the time that we start our class, you are actually prepared for it. Um, Okay, before we start, I think just to ensure that our session today can go smoothly, can I have, I just would like to check in terms of whether you can see and hear us well. Okay, just an audio check. Is it okay? Okay, great. We are here today for another session of Up Close and Personal with our industry leader, to you by the Center for University Industry Collaboration, CUIC UUM. And our topic today, as I mentioned just now, is COVID-19. How unprepared were we from a business unusual to the new equilibrium? And the speaker is Mr. Naguib Mohd. Okay, before we start, let me explain how you can communicate with us during the session. If you have any question, um, just write them in the comment section of our Facebook Live post. We will read some of your question live during the session, and we will have the Q&A session at the end to address more. Yeah. Um, so before we start, I just would like to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker for today is the CEO of Strand Aerospace Malaysia and the president of Malaysia Aerospace Industry Association, MAIA. Najib began his career growing a wealthy aerospace startup and then returned to Malaysia to build Strand Aerospace Malaysia into an organization leading the design and analysis engineering services industry in Malaysia. Najib has been active as an engineer, technologist, and business developer in the global aerospace and supply chain since 2000. He speaks frequently on aerospace and other technology subjects at global events. Uh, we have Najib with us now. You look different.
Yeah, murah.
We can hear you. Uh,
Can you hear me? Oh, hang on.
yeah.
Uh, Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Najib, how things going on?
It's all right. Yeah. More busy than normal. So
Yeah,
working
yeah.
from
I
home is
was
also,
just, like telling my friend last night that now I feel like I'm working like 24/7.
exactly, exactly.
Okay. Okay, Najib. We As we all know, today we're going to have our session with you with the topic that I've mentioned just now, looking at this pandemic, the COVID-19, and how prepared or unprepared are we in meeting these challenges. I know that in the future, I mean, the long term will be the impact of this COVID-19 will be very, very huge. And since we know that many countries around the world now, they have come up with different measures uh, or similar measures as well. And even in the United States, even President Trump also is still struggling in terms of how to manage the extent of this pandemic. Okay, I think to start our discussion today, um, looking at this COVID-19 pandemic, do you think that it is just another black swan event like any other disruption, like such as war, terrorism, like regulatory change, a labor dispute that forces many companies or the entire industries to rethink and transform on how they do business? And do you think that in terms of that the governments, businesses, and people at large are prepared for this, and why? Over to you, Najib.
Okay, so a few things there. I think there's nothing normal about this black swan event. It is a black swan event, but the context is quite different, right? Um, we've had health events before, but never one as global as this. Right? If you look at SARS and MERS, the effect was localized to a degree. It reduced air travel, but it didn't stop air travel, if you recall, because of the method of infection. Right. So this is the kind of infection that or virus that Bill Gates has always been talking about. Right. That could shut down the world. Right. So that's what is done, and it's obviously been compared to economically. The impact is that of the Second World War is the closest thing that it's been compared to, right? Now, the impact, I think, from an industrial point of view, my main point that I like to make to other people is that it is Industry 4.0 brought forward in all aspects, right? Almost simultaneously. Okay, so if we look at Industry 4.0 as people have been planning it for the last, God knows, probably 3 to 4 years in terms of a lot of efforts we put into it. Um, the uh, the disruptions that they were planning for was this technologies disrupting things like supply chains, disrupting things like consumer behaviors, right? And then disrupting whole industries like the transportation industry because of the change in technology used to provide the the need of the people. So in the transportation industry, let's say instead of having cars, 4.0 was bringing about the new electric autonomous mobility vehicles, right? So by us just having to stay at home, we've stopped traffic on the road, right? So what you see today on the road is, what would be closer to if the country was running on electric autonomous mobility, right? Because an electric autonomous mobility vehicle is operating all day, right? Apart from when it's just probably recharging or whatever it is, as opposed to if you compare to your own vehicle, which is only operating maybe 15% of the day, right? So effectively, maybe five or six of us are sharing the service. Yeah. So if that's the case, then the asset is utilized fully. Okay. So generally, what 4.0 business models were towards were a services business model where everybody would use assets to the maximum, hence it becomes more sustainable, and the assets themselves are part of a cyclic economy. Right? So that's what 4.0 technology was going towards in as far as the transportation industry is concerned, right? So by us all not being able to move, it's artificially created that in terms of it's now killed the demand for cars because we are not going out buying cars and potentially so it will start with that we will not buy cars now. Why? Because we're not driving, so nobody's going to go out and buy a car right now, right? And maybe until Raya, if the if the MCO continues till then. And then post then, the economic blowout that's going to come, which is quite severe, right? Going in and out, the government looking at how the industry needs to cope with this, talking with the Economic Action Council and people there. I think it's quite clear a lot of the SME industry is going to be affected in the sense that they will shut down, right? So maybe up to 30-40%, right, of these kind of things will shut down. So if we look at that kind of impact, then basically people's ability to have debt is going to be impacted, right? So you can't be having debt if you don't have an income, right? So so there's a lot of uncertainty. That's also going to affect the housing market, for example, right? So first-time home buyers, next 12 months, nobody is going to want to buy a house, right? If you don't know what job you're going to have, right? So there are a lot of segments of the different markets which are impacted, and it's a cascade effect. So first starts because we are not going out of the house, and then after that, it's because we're not earning, right? And then after that, as people are not buying cars, people are driving less, people are flying less for at least 12 months, then the fuel prices starts to slide, and then once the oil revenue is not there, then how do we pay for the things such as infrastructure, right? So if we don't pay for infrastructure, we're not building stuff, then what happens to all the building contractors, right? So you can see this disintegration of what is the business as usual. So if that's the case, then the question, I mean, it's quite obvious that no country would be ready for this. Particularly, I believe in Malaysia, if they haven't done their risk modeling analysis of what such a situation will cause, right? Yes. So I think if you look at Bill Gates' posts, he talks a lot about the simulations he has run, right? So question is, I don't believe that the Malaysian government has run such simulations. Right? Hence, now you see most of our activities are centered around controlling the disease outbreak, right? But we haven't yet, an orchestrated response to all the different things that would be happening, right? So I don't know whether other countries have got this. Perhaps they have it in different ways, but I don't think any country has had it completely anyway, right? But having said that, like I say, Bill Gates has been doing this for a long time. If you go to the World Economic Forum, prior to the COVID, they also talked about these things as topics within the World Economic Forum. You know, what would happen if a massive outbreak? So, but it was topics, right? Now it's here in real.
Yeah. Yes. True. And in fact, as you mentioned earlier, this coronavirus is actually accelerating the future. The future of we know that IR 4.0 has been here, but we never take it seriously. And in fact, yesterday, during the session where I think Dr. Azmin talked about this forecast for our economy for 2020, they have actually reviewed the forecast to for the growth rate to be between -2 to 0.5%. And with this growth, you can just imagine in terms of employment and so on, what happened to the businesses and the market as a whole. And in fact, if we look at the 17th goal of the SDG, as you mentioned, about how integrate, this, the impact is actually you can, the impact can be all the 17 SDGs actually. Okay.
Right.
After realizing or talking about this issue in terms of the impact and so on, do you think there is the best model in terms of the management model that you think should be adopted by businesses in order to be like flexible and agile as to ensure their sustainability? And considering that we have various what we call industries in terms of the size of a different nature of business, can we have like either one size fits all or different management model that can actually fit to different industries and different size of the businesses?
Okay, so first, I think you have to ask the question, what is business going forward, right? That is, I think that not enough people are asking themselves that question. So what the mindset of most people is that we're going to continue doing the same business, but in a different way. Okay, so if we come back again to that mobility scenario, right? So the business as usual was making cars. Okay, so if I'm a car manufacturer, I design a car, I make a car, or I make several different models of cars, from the cost-effective small four-seater to the luxury sedan, right? And then I segment my market, and then I'm selling to that market, and the number of cars I sell to that market, every car gives me a margin, right? And hence that's my revenue. Okay, so that's what I do if I'm a car manufacturer. A mobility company makes a platform that provides a service of getting you from one point to another, right? What it gets from you as a revenue is a service charge. It never sells you the car, right? So the aerospace business predominantly works like this because the aircraft are often leased to the airlines. The airlines actually do not want to own an aircraft. What they want is to have the service of a flying seat. Yeah, that's what they do, because they sell flying seats. Yeah, they don't sell the experience of flight, right? They sell a flying seat. So whether that sits in a large jet or a private jet or a mobility drone, right, or even a thing like a hyperloop that Elon Musk is building, they don't care, so long as they can sell that seat, right? So now the car maker is now going into that business model where they are providing the service. So now, did they make as many cars? No. They probably make 1/5 or 1/6 the number of cars. Do they make cars every day? No. Today they'll make a car, tomorrow they'll maintain the same car, the next day they will upgrade the car, right? And the idea is to keep that vehicle running for as long as possible to amortize the cost and then make the profit, right? Like with any piece of equipment. So what has disappeared is the consumer market, the product consumer market. And what you're left with is a service consumer market. I've even seen this example in the construction industry. At industrial association meeting, not the aerospace industry, but some other industry association meeting that I've sat in, they have talked about projects like One Belt, One Road, right? Where the One Belt, One Road has begun to put out requests and requirements that they will not buy equipment anymore. They will buy the service of equipment. So that means they're going to pay you by the hour. So now, let's say I make a crane, right? Crane or a tractor, right? Typical thing to build a road. And if today my job is to make the tractor and then sell it to you, right? What I will have in Malaysia, let's say, I will have a workforce that as low cost labor as possible to make that tractor and sell it to you to a price that you want and try and make as much margin as possible. But if suddenly One Belt, One Road says, no, I don't want to buy your tractor, I just want to buy what the tractor has to do to make this road. So you charge me for tractor hours, for example. Now, what kind of tractor am I building? If I build one that is today, and the lifespan of these equipment often is one project, right? You can see them by the side of the road. If you're driving up and down, you can see the second-hand shops carrying them, right? So the tractor you build for the service is going to be multiple project lifespan. So it could be a modular construction, right? It also facilitates for it to be put on a ship to be shipped to any site in the world. It probably has a crew, a specialist crew to get the job done as quickly as possible, as best as possible, because it's a service provider. Now that means that the guy who's making the tractor has got almost nothing to do with the guy who provides the service of the tractor in as far as his mindset is concerned. So question now is, what do you think is business going forward? A lot of what business is going forward is not the same as what it was before. So now you ask question of whether or not businesses need to be agile. By nature, services businesses are agile. By nature, because you are trying to please people. Right? People change their minds all the time, right? And if you are only going to get paid after you've rendered the service, they have to be happy when you service them for whatever situation you're servicing them under. Right? As opposed to if I'm selling you a product, the person doesn't have much choice, right? It's either you take this, product A, B, or C, or leave it, right? But service, I can change a lot of parameters to do with the service. So the mentality of a service industry is very agile, generally. Generally, it's people-centric, knowledge-centric, capability-centric, right? So it's not capital-centric. And most of Malaysian businesses in the past have been focused on capital, whether it's a hotel, it's a manufacturing business, or in some cases even institutional, right? It's about the facilities, right? So now how to become agile in a world where the business is completely different in terms of the model, and because your services are enabled by the internet, you have to be as good as anyone in the world. So if you're a teacher, and if all education goes online, right, you want to charge a premium, you have to be better than all the teachers anywhere in the world, right? So you're no longer competing at the Malaysian standard, right? You are competing at the global standard instantly. Aerospace industry, we're used to this. Why? Because there's only two aircraft manufacturers, really, the big ones, Airbus and Boeing. So if you produce any parts for Airbus and Boeing, you have to be as good as any producer of those parts anywhere in the world. So operating on those sort of circumstances has trained us to be global in our thinking and the way that we work, right? So yeah, to answer your question, it's a bit, I think people don't realize how fundamental the shift really is.
Yes. Especially, I think for small businesses, micro businesses, this is something. The concept is something that quite not familiar to them. Yeah. Okay. As you can see, more than 50 countries have imposed a movement control order, and in which somehow or other affected the supply chain and thus the economic performance of businesses. Do you have any suggestion on how we can actually minimize the negative impact of such measure? Maybe in terms of the new supply chain model that you can actually share with us?
Yeah, so obviously everything that we're going to do now is going forward, right? So it's not about what we can do right now, right? It's about what we can change for if this happens again, right? That's probably what. So, in as far as supply chains is concerned, I think we have to look at what the technology is enabling already and how the markets are evolving. So increasingly, markets are regional, right? So they're not global markets because products and technology can be transferred anywhere in the world now, right? So if I look at, say, one specific technology which is now coming to fore is 3D printing. Yeah. So 3D printing, the what is 3D printing enabling? If I got a 3D printer in Kedah, I got a 3D printer in the US, right? I got a 3D printer in Germany. All it has is powder, right? Let's say powder metal or something like that, right? What makes the product? The product is simply the data. Right? I don't need my supply chain per se, right? I just need the data to get to that machine and it will print me the product. Okay. So if I'm running a services business model, I don't need one product for each person that I have to sell to, right? I need products enough for the service to be consumed. Right? So if it's a it's a product that uses a shared service, for example, it's a shared service product like a mobility vehicle, then that could be one product for 6 customers, right? So I produce a lot less, 1/6. I think for mobility, the number is like 250 million cars in the USA becomes 47 million mobility vehicles, right? So that's the ratio, 1 to 5, 1 to 6. Yeah. So supply chain wise, it becomes such that the main part of the supply chain is the knowledge network. And in fact, that is the real knowledge economy. So I think a lot of people have understood the knowledge economy as having knowledgeable people, right? But the true knowledge economy is when the main commodity that is being traded is knowledge and data. That's actually what the knowledge economy really is. Okay. So what you have to think about is what kind of supply chain thrives on that sort of model, right? Where the revenue is a function of the knowledge. Now, if I take Schumpeterian economics as the fundamental of what is happening today, right? So the principle of creative destruction, um, the cycle of creative destruction is going to happen much faster now. You're on the exponential part of the start of the exponential part of the curve, what they call singularity, right? As we transcend this, the speed of change is going to accelerate, right? So your ability to have differentiated propositions, because of geographical advantage or country advantages, is going to diminish very fast. Your ability to accrue additional capital from margins is going to disappear very fast. It'll appear and then disappear, appear, disappear, right? So when you have this kind of model, then actually you're running a very different kind of supply chain. It's almost like a cash supply chain, right? It's not a margin supply chain. It's a value that is being transferred from one part of the chain to another to sustain that part of the chain, right? And the people who are operating on it. So the distribution of the wealth and capital will be more even, right? And hence why digital currencies and digital forms of exchange are going to be the way to go, because only it has the mobility to enable that sort of pace, right? With the technological change, right? And the change, and again, with that, the technology is not the driver. The driver is the value proposition. So more and more young people will not want to get into a car that's going to pollute the environment. Right? I think we've had the best air quality. The API index in KL is through the roof at the moment, right? It's never been so good, right? The Klang River, I think is clearing out, right? Over the past few weeks, just 3 weeks, right? With no human beings polluting it, it's cleared up. So will they want to go back?
Even now, from India, you can see the Himalayas, where I think before this they couldn't do that.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. So when you look at that, right? This generation is not going to want to go back to what was deteriorating world. Okay, it's going to want better. It's going to want more equitable um, living, right? So you see now countries also because of COVID are going towards universal basic income. And this is quite an important movement because in order for people to be able to take risks and think of new things, right? Which is what I said, right? So things are going to change very fast. So people have to be thinking all the time, right? Taking risks, trying out new things, right? You can't be doing that if you're worrying about whether you have a house, whether you have food, whether you have education for your children, whether you have healthcare, whether you can get to where you need to go, whether you have energy to power your house. These things must be given. So if you look, there is a movement called the fourth sector. The fourth sector is what they intend for the meet between the social model, the business, the commercial model, and the environmental model to be one sustainable model. And that for the fourth sector, all the common services that people need to consume, like education, healthcare, and then a roof over your head and food. So food, for example, urban farming now coming up big and strong, right? Young people may be tasked with, not tasked, sorry, maybe may have the job to run urban farms. So now you have mobility vehicles, so you don't need car parks anymore because the cars are never parked, right? We have millions of square feet of parking space in Kuala Lumpur. In Paris, they're already repurposing some parking space towards urban farms. And so the distance between the crop and the population is next to zero, right? So there's no logistics cost. So you're producing in abundance in a closed area, so no insecticides, nothing like that. You may be using UV or artificial lighting that's charged by solar, right? So you have a 24-hour circadian cycle for your plants, which means your productivity may double or triple. So you have more food than you need, right? So when it comes to that, that's what the 4.0 technology is enabling. It's a new kind of life. They call it the age of abundance, right? If you read the books like Singularity is Near and things like this, right? So I think it's going forward. Then the first steps we need to take is towards enabling more deep technology entrepreneurship. We are severely lacking that. Most of our entrepreneurship is either retail or social, right? In Malaysia, very little of it is deep tech, which is a shame because we have the propensity for it. Right? But I think in the short term, 2 to 3 years, I personally right now cannot see a very. I don't think life will be as we know it anymore. I think what you see in MCO today, this is probably closer to what life is going to be like for the next few 1 2 years. You know, I think,
We have to adapt to that new norms.
you know, yeah.
Okay, as we all know, several countries around the world have actually announced like a stimulus package to helps to revive back the economy, and in fact, Malaysia has done the same. Um, what is your opinion in terms of the stimulus package introduced by our government? The fact that SMEs are the driver of our economy. Do you think that the stimulus package can, in fact, bring back these SMEs to the right track, given the
No.
extent of impact of this pandemic? Yes.
The simple answer is no. Right? So I think what's going to die is going to die. That might be to 30-40%. I think the government is beginning to prepare itself for massive unemployment. Right? How it's going to prepare itself for that, I'm not sure. But that's what they're preparing for. So again, there's no rosy picture to this. We are on the downward slope, and the Malaysian public best embrace this and start to think about as if you were like they say, it's like the Second World War, right?
Yes.
So coming to the Second World War, what you have to consider is that think of yourself as maybe Korea, Japan, or Taiwan, right? That has very little natural resources, right? So what did they do? They started building capabilities. They focused on their people. They started from small sewing shops, building up into eventually car companies, right? That's what Malaysia has to now embrace. Okay, so I'm going to give you the view of what it is that we're facing now. Education, we talk a lot about creating entrepreneurs and all, but to be honest, that's not been I wouldn't have said a widely successful experiment, right? I think there's a level of entrepreneurship that's come out of education, but at the end of the day, there's only so much that education can do in the way that it is, right? So what you need is a healthy environment of large and small companies that have strong capabilities. But the problem is that after the World War, what Malaysia had did two things, right? One is that it was successful in getting back its natural resources, so the oil rights, and then the plantations, right? So all of that was British before. We wrestled it back from them, and suddenly we had quite a lot of cash, right? Because we're in control of our assets, right? But number two, what did what did we do? We went straight back to the British, to be honest. That's the first people we went to, and we asked them to set up their companies in Malaysia so that we could have a job, right? And till today, the norm in most families is that people expect that you go for a high education and then get a job in a big international company, right? That's your whole validation of your existence, right? That you get a multinational business card with a nice title on it, right? And a good paycheck. So if that is the way that we've been thinking, and that goes away because we have lost our competitive advantage, then who's building the economy? Who is building the economy, right? So that's where we're lacking. So what the stimulus package is doing now is trying to ease the pain. That's what it's trying to do, and the government has to do that right now, right? For no other reason than at least the most basic reason: social unrest. Right? You don't ease the pain of people right now, there's going to be social unrest. You have people on the street, right? So that's what it's doing right now. Is it saving businesses? Some it may help to get through this. There are many, like my company is a services company, right? So mine is only salaries. That's what I have to pay. So if my guys would stay with me, if I reduce the salaries or something like that, let's say things get very, very bad, but they're willing to do it because they want to stay and they wait for a brighter day, then I still have my workforce later on, right? But if I have a factory and I have already put 20 million ringgit in buying all the equipment and they're all on loan from the bank, what am I going to do, right? How long can I not service my loans for? I have a moratorium, but then I also lost revenue for 6 months, whatever it is, right? Can I recover from that? Am I still part of the supply chain that I was servicing before? Maybe I'm not. Maybe the supply chain has changed. So will I ever recover? So all these questions are very pronounced now in the supply chain. Now, and I ask you this question: if you were a wealthy, small businessman that had a manufacturing company and you had stored away your money for a long time, you go to Penang, you'll find a lot of these, right? These family-owned businesses, and you say, "Oh, this is going to be bad going forward, right? If I close now, I'll probably be able to just cash out and that will be end of it. My kids are already abroad, probably they studied abroad and now they're living abroad. Doesn't make sense for me to continue, right?" A lot of them are asking themselves this question right now. Cut your losses now before it gets too late, right? So if that's the decision that they are now facing, these are the reasons why they will be shutting down over the next 2 to 3 months, and then some will just die in pain, right? Because there's just no cash flow and stuff like that, right? So I think that government had to do what it had to do to start off with. Is the stimulus package enough yet? You just read the papers, it tells you it's not enough, right? Everywhere they'll say it's not enough. What can be done to save it? I think it's about knowing where we're going next. And then a lot of what we have to do is going to be effectively greenfield.
okay, do you think yesterday I was reading something like this with regards to the our dependence on our fuel, or I mean petroleum. So, do you think that because they're saying that based on the prices now, for the 10 years time to come, maybe we are going to lose like 300 billion from our revenue through petroleum. So, our huge dependency on these natural resources, I think, is really risky for us. So, what do you think are the alternatives for the government is to cushion this impact?
Okay. So we have two things going for us. One is the natural resources, or we had two things going for us. One is the natural resources. The other thing was a strong consumer market, right? So both are affected right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I think the government already in the last two odd years now. Obviously, it doesn't help that we've had three governments in that time. Yeah, um, generally has stayed the path, right? That I think even from the Najib Razak government until now, there've been changes in terms of maybe titles of programs and things like that, and then there've been adjustments, obviously, because there's different views. So from what was the economic transformation program in 2010, and now what we have is Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama. Underlying internally into those things, the economic drivers that have been pursued are similar. The economic drivers are similar. Right? The policies might be different, the focus areas might be different, but the economic drivers are the same. So, and they have been pursuing new growth areas. And these new growth areas are the ones I've spent the last half an hour talking about, right? The issue is the success in driving these new growth areas. Why? Because it's not a dependency on oil. Sometimes you have to put it right. It's not a dependency on oil. It's an addiction to oil. So dependency and an addiction sometimes can look the same, but in effect, one could be the cause of the other, right? Yeah. So an addiction to oil means that if the oil allows us to subsidize our economy, right, and make everything cost less, all right, all the essential items cost less. I can subsidize gula, I can subsidize beras, I can subsidize minyak, right? And so the cost of living is lower in Malaysia. And because the cost of living is low in Malaysia, I can attract multinational companies to come up here and do effectively slightly lower value jobs, right? But with skilled labor because they cost less than where they are. Yeah. So that's maybe been the negotiating position for a while, right? So when the oil stops delivering on the revenue, the real cost of living will start to appear. You go across the border to Thailand, you just fill up your gas, you see what I mean, right? Immediately it's 3-4 times the price. Yeah. So what happens there is the real cost of living is appearing, the real cost of the economy is appearing, and that's what happens when you take out the oil equation. The other thing that the oil does is that it pays for infrastructure, and how many people are effectively linked to the infrastructure development revenue cycle, right? That's a lot, right? So the entire thing has been an addiction. So how do you cushion people who have an addiction? You have to send them to rehab, right? And that's what we're going to go. And what do people look like when they're in rehab? They don't look pretty at all. Right? So there's no cushioning per se. I think I'm saying this now I was saying these things before when I was looking at 4.0, because I think the government in many ways can feel these things happening, right? But at the end of the day, the government is a reflection of the people, right? And if the people don't want to worry about something, then they won't. Like, how many people encourage their children to do their own business if they can get a steady job? And we take this even further back. I remember my grand aunt, saying, "Oh, we should never let the British leave." right? So some of the really old generation are even thinking colonialism was better, right? So when you go through this
Change
now,
of mindset, right? The change of mindset.
total. But change of mindset is not just talking about it, right? Change of mindset, like anything, in Islam we have the concept of insaf, right? And insaf is not just say I say sorry, right? Insaf means you really feel that, oh my God, I've done something that has completely changed my world, and now I have to make amends, right? So in a sense, I think that's where we'll have to go. We'll have to be very frank with ourselves, because the multinationals cannot save us forever, right? I mean, they'll still be here, but they'll evolve. And I deal with multinationals here as well, and their requirements have been evolving a lot. And hence why you see the last few years, a lot of what multinationals have been talking about is unemployability. Right? So, and unemployability is not a function of lack of graduates, because we have a lot of unemployed graduates, right?
Yes,
So
true.
the problem of unemployability is that whatever is graduating is not doing what it is that the industry wants. And what the industry wants is not what it wanted 5, 6 years ago or 10 years ago. Dulu, they wanted workers. Now they want thinkers. Now, the MNC has actually changed. They've actually changed. Why? Because the Honda, the Chrysler, the Toyota is not competing against Mercedes-Benz and BMW. They're competing against Google. They're competing against Geely. They're competing against Tesla, right? Companies that have only been around, some of them 10 years or less, come out of nowhere and completely wipe their market. The number 2 car company in the world today is Tesla, right? In terms of market capitalization. And if you look at the investment firms that invest in them, like ARK Invest in the Valley, they don't call Tesla a car company. They call them a mobility company. And the valuations reflect that of a mobility company, not a car company. Right? So when you see this kind of patterns globally, to win the Malaysian public off that addiction to the comfort that oil brings is going to be the hardest thing that we will have to do, because now everybody will have to work, everybody will have to add value. If you don't add value, there is no place for you, even in the multinational now, right? So I think the government has put a lot in place. We got good education infrastructure. We've got we got a lot of multinationals here. We have a lot of technology capabilities here, but these things are not actually working to create industry yet. So we'll have to find out how to do that.
Even for us, as I mean, as a teacher, as a lecturer, we find it very hard now actually to produce, or in terms of, to produce a kind of graduates that the industry really wants, that the thinker that you are talking about just now. Okay, actually, we are also open, for our viewers to ask any question. So I just would like to welcome anyone who want to ask any question pertaining to the or related to our topics today. We are really welcome any question from the viewers. Is there any question? No.
How many people are there in there? Yes, I can only see two.
How many are they on Facebook?
Oh, this on Facebook as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
we link to the Facebook Live. So we have
Ah,
people, watching us through Facebook as well.
okay.
Um, okay. Maybe we can based on your experience, you know, 61. Okay, maybe based on your experience, you know that now we have like around 4,000 students are still in campus. We know some of them now is getting stressful being here inside the campus. Can you do you know you do you have any any advice for them, or in terms of anything that you want to, to share with them?
Say the line. Um, I think now the common adage "think out the box" is going to be your new mantra, right? Because and you're really going to have to live it, right? Because I think your circumstance has changed completely, right? Um, the ready avenues that you might have had before for employment are now reduced tremendously. So you you're going to have to be resourceful, and the good thing is that now we have the internet, right? We do have the internet, although it's been put through its paces. I think in the last 3 weeks, I think you can see suddenly the bandwidth is not as great as we thought it was in Malaysia, right? When everybody is on it, and everybody is forcing themselves to operate on it all the time, right? So I think the internet provides you many opportunities to first understand what your circumstances are, and understand what your opportunities are, right? And your opportunities are global, even if you're local, right? So even your so one good example, a good friend of mine, Nick Shazwan. I remember when, so I was born in 76, right? So I don't know what, I think 93 SPM, something like that I am. And when we went off overseas, so he went to the US, and I was in the UK, right? Um, Now, when he came back, brilliant guy, went to Carnegie Mellon University, right? Electrical industry. After he trained, he founded a boutique guitar amplification company. Right? So I think he was producing guitar amplification kits first, right? Kits for people to build their own guitar amplifiers, right? And now he builds full amplifiers, and he's like, I think more than 80% of his market is export. More than 80%, and it's to the US and Europe, right? And I know that even like very popular musicians, I think John Mayer also has one of his amps, if you think about it, right? So how did this Malaysian guy, kan Kelantan, Kota Baru, right, found a globally competitive guitar amplification business, right, in a market that is so exclusive to, I mean, mostly that play his amps are blues players, and the best blues players are not necessarily in Malaysia, right? They are in the West, right? In America, in the Delta, in Mississippi Delta, that's where they are. So I think that's a great inspiration. I think what Nick has done, and then and others like Kamarul from Aerodyne, another friend of mine, started with a small 10-man outfit that was doing drone services, perfecting what he was doing, and now he's the biggest drone company in the world. Right? Again, your opportunities are global, but I believe it's not anymore about being rich. I don't think it's about being rich anymore, right? I think it's about equity, right? It's about leadership. It's about, we need to be helping each other at this time, right? We need to be there to help each other succeed as human beings, right? And success, and in the Muslim context of it, is about your knowledge, right? And that is the knowledge economy, right? If you think about it. So I think that's a value shift here. So I'm quite happy to see, when I see on my Facebook sometimes posts of graduates who are now turning to farming, introducing technology to farming, bringing food, because there's a lot of there is a lot of real value in that, and it is a lot of real people which are benefiting from that, right? So rather than, because I think Malaysia is still, I think the agriculture department yet has a clear policy whether or not Malaysia's agricultural policy is cash crop or food sustainability. And going forward, it's quite clear food sustainability is going to be a very important thing. COVID-19, if you listen to Bill Gates, he says every 20 years this is going to happen now. Right?
Okay, we have now a question from our audience, one of our staff here. from Dr. Chandrakantan. His question is that the government are planning lots of things for SMEs. These are existing businesses. In the university, we are also planning for graduate entrepreneurs who will become future entrepreneurs. This COVID-19 has actually put our thinking to pause at the moment. And any ideas on what can spur entrepreneurship in campus among graduates? I need some enlightenment and really appreciate it.
Okay.
I mean, the way how they do in terms of
So,
planning and so on, yes.
okay, I won't talk in context of programs. All right, I think that's not the value that I can bring. And unfortunately, I know a lot of people want to hear that. Right, what kind of program can we do? Right. Yeah. But so that would not be challenging you enough, lah. I think if I just said, "Oh, do this program, do that program, everything will be fine." Right. I think you have to think about the asset of the university as an asset, right? And maybe from thinking of it as an asset, look at what are the sub assets within that big university asset, right? And then look at the assets around the university. You know, what is it connected to? So I think in discussions with yourself and some of the other profs in UUM, I've always said that. So UUM being at the north here, you know, and the only business university or big business university in the north of Malaysia, you are on that border of Thailand onwards and Malaysia, right? It's a massive economic zone, right? UUM should be the knowledge base for that zone, right? So potentially you can consider that, you know, and you have to look at that zone as a market. It's a market, right? I think people don't think enough about the market these days. So what you want to consider is how the entrepreneur thinks, as opposed to the old style big conglomerates, right? The old style big conglomerates, the way that they think about technology is that they would have a lab that looks at tech, finds something interesting, tries to make it commercializable, and pushes it out as a product. Right? So that's the trajectory, right, of how tech used to be. Today, startups, what do? Startups look for problems. Right? So what's the problem? Because in the problem is the opportunity. Right? Okay, people cannot afford to take transport or buy cars. All right, maybe we need a mobility solution. Right? And then they reverse back and say, okay, to do a mobility solution has to have all these features, right? So there's a guy called Jeff Hunt, I think, in Singularity University from I think Deloitte, one of the consultants Deloitte. He talks about this cycle now, right? So what you have is you identify the problem, and then you engineer the solution for that problem, because the world now is a global network of knowledge and engineering and design capability, right? So you then pull that resource to solve a problem. And the problem in this market is different to the problem in other markets, right? And the easiest person to solve problems and service problems in this market is the people in the market. So you have a market incumbency. What you may not see now yet is what is the market. What are the problems that the market needs solving, right? What are the business models, like AirAsia, for example? They run a very strong cash cycle, right? So they'll sell you a ticket 12 months in advance, right? For one-third the price, maybe. Yeah. Now, for a company to get paid for the service prior to being rendered 12 months in advance, that's cash in hand, right? That's cash in hand. So Mars doesn't work like that, right? Mars is a premium airline, right? So a lot of premium airlines have a lot of trouble with the low-cost airline business model, you know, because low-cost airlines just want to cap the cash, wants to get the cash, yeah? So by doing that, see the tagline of AirAsia, everyone can fly. And that's literally what it's trying to do, because it found the problem. People wanted to travel in Southeast Asia, right? They wanted to go on holiday, on business from, you know, KL to Myanmar, to places where, you know, I remember when I was growing up, I've never ever been to Myanmar before, right? Never seen the Angkor Wat temples, right? For example, right? But AirAsia now, if you go to, you just sit in Angkor Wat, right? Number of Malaysian youngsters that come nowadays to visit these places, right? Ho Chi Minh City, right? A lot, right? All backpacking. Why? Because everyone can fly. So you have to find the problem. So if the university is one of these places that is studying these problems and then allowing entrepreneurs the means of tackling these problems and turning them into business opportunities, that could be the function of the institution. Right? So that's not program, is it? It's actually a hub of activity of some sort, right? So you have to understand then what you need to be able to enable that. It's not in a textbook, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question coming from Dr. Marlin. What do you think of Trump's way of managing the pandemic?
Okay,
It's about
so
Trump. Yeah.
it's very critical. Okay, trust Malin to ask something like that. um, I think Trump is really addressing it like a big company businessman, right? So bottom line first, right? So that's what that's where he's going
Yeah,
first
he's
and
very
foremost.
much of the businesses.
Yeah, particularly those that potentially will affect him, yeah,
Yeah.
or whether it's politically or otherwise. So uh, he in my mind, he doesn't operate like your normal politician. Yeah, some have actually said there's positives that have come out of how Trump runs America. But I think at the end of the day, like I said, the world is going towards this whole equitable sort of um, mindset, right? And my money is more behind someone like Jacinda from New Zealand, right? Than someone like Trump, So they were saying, the countries that have coped best with COVID, on average, have been mostly the countries that have been run by women. And
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense, because their priorities would be maternal, right? In that sense, right? The priorities would be that, and that is what humankind needs in instances of crisis, right? So I think it's the balance between these two things, and I don't see Trump as someone who's balanced. You know,
Okay, another question coming from Dr. Anggapan. How is the ethnic and religious relationship being managed in our country, and how should it be managed so that it provides greater resilience to withstand and overcome disruptive problems such as COVID-19? So, I mean, he's talking about this, unity during the crisis, regardless of religions and
so I
ethnics.
think that, I mean, you have to get realistic in that economic pressures always augment, these kind of differences, right? That's what it tends to do, yeah, because people are in difficult situations, and then it's an us and them type thing that becomes there. But having said that, I think first thing to appreciate is Malaysia. If I compare to a lot even Western countries today, right? Yeah, the level of understanding between the different races is well beyond um, most countries in the world, right? So we almost have friendly racism sometimes, right? In a coffee shop type of conversation, and it's more. I believe it's more the appreciation of differences, and certainly that's how I grew up, right? That's how I grew up. So the uh, um, the management of these things, I think, starts with the economic management. Yeah, this is quite important, and ensuring that that race does not become a reason for any discrimination that in terms of anybody's basic economic needs, right? So food, shelter, and the ability to sustain oneself, right? So that needs to be very equitable, right? That cannot have any sort of bias to it. Um, and then inevitably we're going to have these problems, and I think communication dialogue is quite important, and I think that's the thing that Malaysians are actually good at. We like to talk, right? We need to talk to each other in these times. We need to take the time to understand each other, because sometimes, like in your household, right? If if you got a family crisis happening, that's when all the bad stuff start, all the bad behaviors of the mom and dad and the kids all come out, right? So you can't judge them from the behavior that they display at that time, because that's augmenting all the negatives, you know. So I think we have to be very sentient to the things that would trigger these things, and that's what the government is definitely looking at, right? Making sure, and I think Muhyiddin, one thing is, Tashim Muhyiddin's thinking is like that, you know, make sure that everybody on the basic level is okay. Everybody is basic level okay. We can maintain that at least, then you won't augment all the nasty stuff that people get up to when they're unhappy.
Okay, another question coming from viewers, I think from outside of the university. So from Encik Ibrahim Saleh, his question is, what is your best advice to SMEs during this coronavirus crisis?
Sorry, you froze for a second there. Can you just repeat the question?
Okay, what is your best advice to SMEs during this coronavirus crisis? Your advice to those.
I think okay. Yeah, that's a tough one because SME is a quite a broad range of companies, right? From everything from food and beverage to engineering. Hello, are we still there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry. Uh, yeah, sorry. So I think now SMEs should be looking at their market and seeing whether or not their market is still there, right? And they have to be very realistic about how it's going to pan out over the next. The SMEs, they have to look at usually 6 month horizon. Usually 6 month horizon. Most SMEs have about 3 months sort of cash, right? That kind of that's on a typical level. So if your business outlook over the next 12 months, there's no clear stability to it, right? There's no clear off-taker to the product or the service that you're doing. First, you have to take prudent measures on your cost. Definitely, first thing, right? So if you want to sustain the business, otherwise you decide to close, right? Otherwise you decide to close. If you decide to continue, you have to look at prudent measures on your costs, and then you really have to look at some level of diversification. If it's not in the market, which maybe not the best place to start, the first thing in terms of making your service more accessible, right? So, you know, from just doing in the shop and waiting for people to come to buy your food, online distribution and stuff like that, right? You know, so look at your sales channels. But then also look at your product space. You know, if the market becomes crowded, for example, yeah, let's say, you know, to sell outside is very difficult, right? So you have to sell within the internal market, and you have to look at your price point and maybe differentiation in your product, right? So 3 types of nasi goreng, you know, has to be 3 different choices, right? Has to be 3 different choices, and the opportunity to get a part of the nasi goreng market needs to be considered lah. Kali said, you know, yeah, you know, so really understand your market in terms of have another look at it. Yeah, you might know your market today, but have another look at it, and then make sure your cost control and measures are prudent lah.
Okay, I think we're going to take another one last question coming from Dr.
Sure.
Chandra again. Will exam-oriented approach become invalid, and we need to look at other approaches to look for solution? So Dr. Chandra is asking about, do we think that now exam-oriented is, you know, is it something that is valid for us to do now?
I mean, to be honest, I think most educators already accept that that's a problem already, right? Because it doesn't. I think that the challenge with exam-oriented evaluations is that I mean, I'm a businessman, right? I'm a businessman. I can safely say 90% of the millionaire businessmen in my generation that I know right, are not the, the ones who did well in the exams.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so I can categorically say that almost, right? In fact, Nick Shazwan was one of the few that is the contrary, but he was by far not a geek. He just was very talented academically. He was always doing the opposite of what everybody else was doing, right? But in general, then the other thing that the examination does is that, and it's been used for in the first, second, third industrial revolution. It's a popular tool to weed out people, right? And it does two things that I find are not favorable for what's happening today. Right? One is that it will promote people who, like I say, were in the entrepreneurial field, will not be the ones that would be best suited, right, to take on what the challenges are to build a company. Now, even the multinationals who are now asking for entrepreneurs to create the market for them, they cannot rely on people who effectively may be book bound, if you like, right? Okay. The other thing is that it artificially also then segregates people who are um, uh, talented, right? Because there's only one benchmark, it's the paper, right? So the ones that actually have ability then are unfortunately measured by the same bar. So they then you lose their motivation, right? There's a risk you lose their motivation rather than you find what they are good at and then you amplify that because everybody's good at something, right? And now that we have a world that needs so many things, right? You want everybody who's good at something to be doing the thing that they're good at, right? You know, in that sense. Now that doesn't take away from what is classical education, right? So the classical knowledge that's there, and but that my experience personally, um, I think you need to know maths. Yeah? You need to know your language, right? How you're going to communicate. These are the basics, right? And then as a human being, you need to know what the world is, and you need to know where you've come from, right? So those are things that you need to know, right?
To stay humble.
To stay humble, yeah. And then Southeast Asia, most of us have a little religion, so you need to know what you believe in, right? So um, I think having those things, then the rest of the knowledge is acquired in an applied context, right? So I think in Singapore now they're beginning to allow people to get a degree, right, by going to different institutions, yeah, and that's and over time, you know, over the experiences, and what happens is people then not only do they get what they need when they need it, when they're in there, because they need it for a reason, right? Not and it's not necessarily, and now in that kind of mode, rarely is it going to be for the reason I need this piece of paper. It's going to be for the reason is I need
What
this
they
knowledge,
call
right?
as personalized, personalized learning. Yes.
Yes, yeah, and it's because they need to know it. They need to know it to do something, right? And someone who needs to know something to do something has an understanding or has some experience to add to the thing that is being learned.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street when someone is learning in that context, which is what an apprenticeship actually is, right? So where does the I think assessment is what you're asking, right? So paper exam, are we really going to say that that's going to be how we must do things forever? No, but do you have to assess people? Yes, right? So now we have to think of what are the means of assessing people, and more, you know, you find that experience doesn't so much. Yeah, it's skills and capability. If a 10-year-old has a skill and capability to do the job, right, and you put in next to a 40-year-old, who are you going to take, right? You know what I mean? So experience in terms of years, like in your CV, I got 30 years of this experience, doesn't mean the same thing anymore in this world.
Yeah. True. Okay, Mr. Najib, we come to an end because now already I think 11:15. I would like to thank you and also UUMIT, our JPP for the facilities that I'm using now, the CUIC facilities now. And also, I think our corporate com for the advertisement and all, and also viewers out there for joining us today. Um, we have learned a lot from this discussion, and in fact, very interesting the concept that you share with us today. And I hope that we can, meet again in the future to discuss on several other issues, maybe, related to economics, finance, and so on. And I think for the CUIC, they have other series coming up, so stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done, well done.
Thank you.